This episode is brought to you by Gold and Ivy. Gold and Ivy is a Nashville soy candle company specializing in creating a calm and intentional home. They've been one of my favorite small businesses in Nashville for a long time, and now you can bring their one-of-a-kind scents right into your own home, no matter where you are. Use my code BOOT15 to get 15% off of your next order. Their fall scents are out now, and honestly, they're all so good. I think my favorite is Gray Flannel, but it's really a close race. Oh, and they also now have room sprays, which I'm very excited about. Free shipping is available on all domestic orders over $75, and if you live in Nashville, you can do free local pickup. Again, use the code BOOT15 at checkout to get 15% off of your next purchase. Visit goldenivy.com today. In honor of it being spooky season, I thought I would tell you some country music ghost stories. The history of country music is really old, so of course there's a lot of dead people and old buildings, so there's going to be ghosts, right? And surprisingly, a lot of our favorite country stars have actually had experiences with the spirit world or have stuck around long enough to haunt us themselves. I'm country singer Brent Snyder, or am I? Maybe I'm a ghost. And this is Root of the Boot. Let's start this spooky dooky episode. Did I just say dookie? All right, well, I guess I'm off to a crappy start. Get it? Crappy duke. All right, well, let's start with the Ryman. The Ryman, okay. Hey, Brent, what's the Ryman, you may ask? Well, friend, let me tell you, the Ryman is a very, very sacred building in country music. Every country artist who's ever come to town, meaning Nashville, has wanted to play the Ryman or just even go near it. It is the mothership. The Ryman Auditorium was home to the Grand Ole Opry from 1943 to 1974. Now, the building was built in 1892 and was originally a church. I'm already creeped out. Old churches, creepy, right? So many dead bodies, because funerals, I guess. Thomas Ryman was the owner of the building, and he originally built it to be sort of like a mega church of its day. Funny story, actually. So Thomas Ryman, in 1885, he went to a tent revival, and the reason he went was to heckle the pastor, to be like, yeah, you Christians, you idiots. And he ended up like converting to Christianity at that tent revival, then came home to Nashville and was like, well, now I got to build a church because, natural progression there. So he built the Ryman. It was originally called the Union Gospel Tabernacle, but in 1904, when Thomas Ryman died, they renamed it to the Ryman Auditorium in his honor. Now, contrary to his wishes, the venue started to allow more secular music and plays to come through, and that is not what he wanted at all. So it seems like this may have stirred up his ghost. Ryman's spirit was fine with most of the onstage performances, but if people were getting a little bit too risque, he would definitely make himself known by like stomping around on stage and just wreaking havoc to the point where like spectators would just have to leave because it was so loud. This famously happened during a production of Carmen when he just sort of like wreaked havoc on the production because the show is about a gypsy temptress, and he was like, no, not on my watch, not in this church. So he just like made it really loud, and people were like, well, we can't hear anything, we have to go. Hank Williams Sr. has also been heard a lot at the Ryman. Staff say that they'll just hear him singing clear as day, like late at night, which that just like gave me chills thinking about being in the Ryman, an old freaking church, and you're just like they're sweeping the floors and you just hear like that would be creepy. That was creepy. I'm sorry for that, butchering that performance, but that would be insane. They've also seen him like in the alley between the Ryman and Tootsie's. And Tootsie's, if you don't know, is a famous honky tonk on Broadway that a lot of like the older stars used to frequent. And there's an alley, it shares an alley with the Ryman Auditorium, and Hank used to like, I guess, hang out there and maybe smoke. I don't know, but people say that they see him in the alley as well. Ooh, scary. There's another spirit that's often referred to as the Gray Man, and people think that it is one of the many Confederate soldiers that used to frequent the Ryman. People say that they've seen him while artists are like rehearsing. So he like sits up in the balcony and can be seen while rehearsals are taking place or while the auditorium's not full. But anytime anyone gets too close, he sort of like scurries away. He must be shy. Now, the lady, on the other hand, is not as much a spectator as the gray man. So people say that the lady is a performer. And a lot of people say that she can be heard late at night in the Ryman singing. And most people say that she sounds like Patsy Cline, which again, kind of gives me chills. That's kind of creepy to be in an old freaking church and you just hear Patsy Cline singing like Sweet Dreams, which is a haunting song. Consequently, one of my all-time favorite country songs and the song that I plan to sing on my Opry debut, whenever that may be. Now, speaking of Patsy Cline and Hank Williams, both died very tragically way too soon, and a lot of people talk about this Opry curse. So I told you that the Opry was at the Ryman from 1943 to 1974. Well, during that time, like a slew of artists died. When I say a slew, I mean a slew. Like 37 people died during this time. And it wasn't just like, oh, she died. It was like they were slaughtered or like OD'd or like were in tragic like plane crashes and wrecks. I mean, you had Hank Williams, you had Patsy Cline, you had Texas Ruby, there was String Bean Aikman. There were all these people who were like in their prime and very popular and just like keeled over. So there was the rumor of this Opry curse. Well, then the Opry moved from the Ryman to its home now in the Grand Ole Opry building. And it didn't really stop. Like, people still kept dying. So I don't know if the curse is still there or not. Hopefully not, because that wouldn't be good. Okay, and lastly, Elvis. So Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's daughter, was performing at the Ryman one time. And she had finished her show and she was going back to her dressing room. And she noticed that her door was like super glued shut. Well, not actually, but it was like locked, like really locked, to the point where like staff had come and like her band had come and they were all trying to open this door and they couldn't get it open and they didn't understand why it was locked like from the inside because no one was in there. And then, oh, I'm getting chills thinking about it. Lisa says that she hears Elvis's laugh on the other side of the door and then the door opens. Ugh. But we know this can't be true because in order to be a ghost, you have to be dead. And we know that Elvis is not dead. Whatever's going on at the Ryman, I got to figure it out. Apparently they do ghost tours, so I may go do one. So I'll keep you posted. Neon Cowboys is a fashion tech brand specializing in Western glowing apparel and accessories. They like to say that their goal is to bring unapologetic joy, acceptance, and pride to those that like to get lost in a good time. Their neon light up apparel promotes this goal by allowing individuals to glow from the inside out. I personally love their neon cowboy hats and their Out Past Midnight boots. They also have these glow in the dark cowboy boots, which are really awesome. You can get 10% off of your purchase by using the code Brent Snyder. So visit neoncowboys.com and use the code Brent Snyder for 10% off of your entire order. Loretta Lynn is one of the most well-known and beloved country singers of all time. Coal Miner's Daughter is my all-time favorite movie. That's beside the point. But did you know that she has had several encounters with ghosts? She even went on a TV show and talked about it. And she owns a haunted house. Not like, woo, it's Halloween, let's go to a haunted house. Like where people are dressed up, like an actual haunted house with ghosts. But like, not like people with sheets over you know what I mean? She had like ghosts, real ghosts, okay? Do you have it? Do you got it? Great. In 1966, Loretta bought an old plantation. Well, that's not true. Actually, she bought a whole freaking town. It's complicated, but the gist is Hurricane Mills, Tennessee is an unincorporated community inside of Humphreys County, Tennessee. All this is just like an hour west of Nashville. So Loretta just bought the whole dang thing. Well, except for the cemetery, which is ironic because ghosts. So she owns this whole thing, right? So she buys this town, and over the years, there's been a lot of like ghosts and like weird stuff happening there. So first, let's start with the Confederate soldiers. Well, actually, let's go back farther than that. So this land was originally occupied by Native Americans, and it's reported that Native Americans fought really hard to stay on this land, but we know how that story goes. Thanks, Andrew Jackson, also from Tennessee. So Native Americans, a lot of them died there. Burial grounds. This is not starting well, right? Native American burial grounds is never a great way to start a story. So fast forward to the Civil War. God, this land is old. It's like real old. So Civil War happens, and there was like an actual like battle, I think, on this land. And a lot of Confederate soldiers died. Loretta says that 19 Confederate soldiers died on the land just to one side of the actual house. Her kids, Loretta's kids, report being woken up in the middle of the night and like seeing Confederate soldiers or being like pulled on by Confederate soldiers in the middle of the night. And a lot of visitors have seen them as well. One dude was like fishing in the creek or river or whatever is on the property, and there was like a bridge in the distance, and he was just like fishing, and something caught his eye, and he looked up and he just saw this like Confederate soldier just like strolling along the bridge, not a care in the world, just marching to war, I guess. Like, and then he just like vanished into thin air. Also, why do we call it thin air? I don't understand that. I mean, I guess I get thick air because fog, but thin air, what does thin air mean? Like less oxygenated? But that would be on top of a mountain. What is thin air? Whatever. Stay focused, Brent. Aside from the Confederate soldiers, there's also Old Man Anderson. That's what Loretta calls him, but his real name was James T. Anderson, and he owned the plantation for a long time. Actually, the cemetery that's on the grounds is named the Anderson Cemetery, and it's just like all the old dead Andersons in there, including Old Man Anderson, James. And he's been seen around the property a lot. Loretta's actually even seen him as well. Oh, by the way, I should mention, Loretta doesn't live there anymore, but the grounds are used as sort of like it's kind of like a museum. I mean, there's a museum on the property that has like a bunch of Loretta memorabilia, and there's like a mill, and there's like the house that you can tour. So anyways, now that it's sort of like a tourist spot, there were some staff that had gone to the house, and they went to one of the upper balconies to hang some like, I guess, bunting or banners for 4th of July. And these 3 ladies go out on the balcony, they're like hanging the flags or whatever, and they turn back around to go inside the door, and the door's just like locked. And they're like, well, we didn't lock it. Why would we lock ourselves out? That doesn't make any sense. And so they had to like wait for someone to like come near the house. And then they were like, they found a guy, and he came in and unlocked the door. And they were like, who locked us out? Who was in here? And they're like, nobody's in here. And so they think it was Old Man Anderson, because he doesn't like when anything is like messed with. He likes the house to stay the way that it is. He doesn't want people to like make changes. So apparently Loretta has made a deal with him that she wouldn't do anything to like disrespect the house. Any changes that she made, she would be respectful about it, and she wouldn't like demolish anything. Well, knowing this, before she moved out, she hung like all of her records along the steps, like leading up the steps. And she told the tour guides, she was like, don't touch those records. But she didn't really like tell them why. She was just like, don't touch them. In her mind, she knew, because Old Man Anderson was going to like get ticked off. So anyways, a tour guide's doing a tour, and she's standing on the steps, like kind of backwards, looking down the steps at the tour group in front of her. And she's like talking with her hands, much like I do, as you can see. And she hits one of the records on the wall, and it just sort of like goes askew a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the tour group like turns white, and they're like, who's that man behind you? And she's like, what? There shouldn't be a man behind me. And apparently they saw like a ghost of a man behind the girl, the tour guide. And they say it was probably Old Man Anderson, because she had like screwed with the wall, the records, and he was pissed. So there you have it. He showed up. So then there's the lady in white. A few of Loretta's daughters said that they kept seeing this lady in white at night. One of the daughters said that she would wake up and look across the hall into a dark bathroom that was across the hall, and the lady in white would just be like standing there staring at her. No, absolutely not. Get out of my bathroom. Go somewhere else. Loretta herself has seen the lady in white. So she came home from tour. Loretta, not the lady in white. She wasn't on tour, I don't think. So Loretta comes home from tour, and she pulls up in front of the house, and she can see up on one of the upper balconies, there's this lady who's sort of dressed in white, and she's just like pacing across the upper balcony, and she's like crying, and she's like really distraught. So Loretta goes in, and no one's like really in the house except for like the nanny. I think her name was Gloria. And so she's like, hey, Gloria, who's up on the balcony crying? And Gloria's like, what are you talking about? So they go up to the balcony, and there's nobody there. So Loretta comes back down, and she like goes out on the front porch, and she's just like, she's puzzled. She looks over into the cemetery. There she is, the lady in white, just standing in the cemetery. So it turns out, they find out later that old man Anderson had a son. I think he had multiple children, but this one particular son had a wife, and they had had a child that died the same day that it was born. And then the mother of the child died like 12 days later of like a broken heart. So they think the lady in white is her. And she's like crying and distraught because she either has like lost her child and she can't find him, or she knows that he's like not alive anymore. Okay, the last one I'll tell you really kind of creeps me out. So as we know, this house was a plantation. And what do we know comes along with plantations? Say it with me. Slavery. Ugh, gross. Okay, so Loretta was at home one night. None of her kids were there. Doolittle, her husband, was gone. And she was there with a friend. And they were just like chilling on the couch watching TV. By the way, what do you think Loretta Lynn watches on TV? She just watching like Real Housewives? I doubt it. But anyways, they're watching TV and they hear footsteps, like someone's walking on the front porch, like back and forth. But no one ever comes to the door and knocks or comes in. And so they're like, that's weird. And Loretta turns to her friend and she's like, did you hear that? And her friend's like, yeah. So they're like, whatever. I don't know who would be, whatever. I would be like up in that business, like looking out the front door and be like, who is there? Anyways, so they go on watching TV and then they hear it again. And Loretta's like, well, now I'm going to get to the bottom of this. That's my Loretta Lynn impression. It's terrible. So she goes to the door and no one's there. But when she gets to the door, she hears like chains clanging. Look, I have chains. Do you hear that? If you're listening on the podcast, I'm wearing a jacket that is nothing but chains. Go check it out. So she hears these chains and it's coming from like under the porch. And she's like, what in the world? Come to find out, guess what's under the porch? A slave dungeon. I mean, I guess that's what you call it. A dungeon, or like, it's where they like chained up the slaves and like beat them and stuff. So they're like, well, I guess that was like one of the old plantation owners just like making his rounds, making sure that everyone was chained up. Ugh. That creeps me out. I mean, with all this, would you move? Let me know. Would you move or would you stay there? Loretta says that she's not creeped out by it, or that, I mean, she doesn't live there anymore, but she was never creeped out by it. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I might, like, that's too much. I think I would have to go. I would have to go. There's a mouse in my house right now, and I'm about ready to move out and let him, I'm going to pay the rent for him because it's just too much. A couple years ago, my friend got me the greatest Christmas gift you could ever get a country music lover. This book. For those listening on the podcast, it's a book. It's called Country Music and Illustrated History. Now, I'm not much of a reader. I typically enjoy podcasts and videos, clearly. But this book is sacred to me. The incredible filmmaker Ken Burns curated this book along with Dayton Duncan, and it contains some of the most amazing images from country music's past and gives a really detailed account of the birth and life of America's favorite music genre. Right now, you can get a huge discount on this book by using the link in the description of the podcast or video that you are consuming right now. This discount is only for a very limited time, and there are not a lot of copies left, so go do it today. It would make the perfect gift for the country music lover in your life. Again, you can only get this discount by using the link in the description of this video or podcast. If you were thinking, Johnny Cash, he seems like a man who's seen a ghost or two, well, you'd be correct. Johnny Cash had a vacation home in Jamaica called Cinnamon Hill. And it was an old plantation home, sensing a theme here. And in one encounter, Johnny was having a dinner party, and he had like, I think 6 of his friends there, and they were all sitting around this gigantic dining room table. They're all just chit-chatting. And all of a sudden, this woman appears out of thin air. Remember thin air? She appears out of thin air, and she's wearing a long white gown. There's so many themes in this story. Thin air, plantations, long white gowns. Anyways, she appears in a long white gown, and she like walks across the room, and they're all just like watching her. Like, who invited this girl? And she like walks through the doors. They're not open. They're closed. She walks through them. So I guess that whole thing's true. Ghosts walking through walls and doors must be real. Johnny Cash saw it. And that was like it. And he said that he didn't have a problem with it and that he's seen multiple ghosts in his life. And he felt like that they respected him. Another theme. Loretta also felt like the ghosts respected her. Ghosts respect country stars. Got it. Earnest Hub. Remember him? Well, this story is about his iconic record shop. So in Nashville on Broadway, there's the historic Earnest Hub record shop. And it's historic for a lot of reasons, but it sort of gave a lot of country artists their start. They would go and play there, or they would debut their album there. There's a whole scene about it in Coal Miner's Daughter where Loretta Lynn goes and she plays. I think Patsy Cline was supposed to play that night, and she played for Patsy, and Patsy was in the hospital, and she sang one of Patsy's songs, and it was a whole thing. Anyways, this building apparently was a military hospital during the Civil War. What's with the Civil War in this episode? So lots of death, lots of ghosts. Again, apparently there's a haunted CD player. I don't know about this one, y'all. Who wrote this? Fire the writers. Oh wait, I'm the writers. Anyways, there's a possessed CD player, and apparently if you're in there and you just mention a country singer's name, like the next time it plays that country artist song. So I will be on Broadway the rest of this week in Earnest Hub Records shop, just screaming Brent Snyder to see if it plays my music. We'll see. Besides the possessed CD player, employees and staff have said that they've felt some just really weird things. Sudden dips in temperature, people touching them when no one was standing nearby, being perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden feeling this overwhelming sense of sadness. All those things are very characteristic of a ghost. So, I mean, it was a Civil War, like, military hospital. It's for sure haunted. So, I don't know that I'll be going back there, but we'll see. I'll report back. Then there's a newer building in Nashville that's said to be haunted as well. It's the Gaylord Opryland Resort. It sits just beside the Grand Ole Opry House. Many people have said they've seen Hank Williams' ghost there or Roy Acuff's ghost there, but the most common sighting is who they call the Lady in Black, or the Black Lady, and she's just seen in like Civil War garb and a veil over her face, just like walking around doing laps. People think that it's Mrs. McGavick, who is the wife of Mr. McGavick, who they owned the land that hotel's on now. So Johnny Horton was a pioneer of the rockabilly movement, and he was really good friends with Johnny Cash and Merle Kilgore, who was a great songwriter. And they all really believed in the spirit world. So they all had an agreement that whoever died first would come back with a message to let them know that the spirit world was real. And the message that they were supposed to receive was, the drummer is a rummer and he can't hold the beat. So for years, Merle Kilgore is just like chilling, sitting around, waiting to get this message from Johnny Horton, and it never comes. So years later, he's doing this interview for a radio station in New York City, and then this really bizarre caller calls in and is like, hey, I have no idea who you are, but the weird thing is, my friends and I were like playing around with a Ouija board a while back, and we got this message from the spirit world, and it spelled out Merle Kilgore. And then right after that, it spelled out, the drummer is a rummer and he can't hold the beat. I don't know where Johnny Horton's lines got crossed in there, but at least the message got to him. Okay, clearly the ghost of Hank Williams gets around. We've talked about him multiple times, and we have a couple more stories about him. People say that if you go to his graveside, you can actually feel his presence there. And more than a few people have said that they see like this mist coming down the hill, like towards his graveside, and will like hover over his grave. Creepy. Speaking of Hank, there's this country song called The Ride by David Allan Coe. And the song's basically about just like chilling with the ghost of Hank Williams. And it was co-written by Gary Gentry. Now, Gary says he wrote the song after an impromptu seance where he tried to get the spirit of Hank Williams to come to him. So after lighting a few candles, Gary starts like begging the ghost of Hank Williams to appear to him. And after a little bit, he looks down the hallway and he appears. Hank Williams is sitting on his sofa shirtless, just sort of like sulking. I've got chills right now because that creeps me out. It should be noted that Gary was drinking pretty heavily at the time, and maybe he was just seeing things, you know? I mean, I can relate. One time I got so drunk that I got home and it was like 3 a.m. and I had to take my dog out because he's still got to pee whether I'm drunk or not. So I took him for a little walk down the road, and I could see a deer off in the distance. And I was like, I don't want to bother the deer, and I just kind of want to watch it do its thing. But it was taking forever to like move anywhere. And I'm like, all right, Bambi, come on, let's get the show on the road. And so I walked a little bit closer, only to realize it was a mailbox. Always making my parents proud. Okay, I was going to end the story here. That's all I have written. But I kind of think that I have a ghost story of my own. So as I was writing this episode, I was staying up late writing it, doing all this research, and I kept writing about the ghost of Hank Williams. Well, then I was like, I love Hank Williams. One of the books in the background is a biography of Hank Williams. I was obsessed with him. So you know how a good sign that you might have a ghost is you wake up with like scratches or marks or bruises on you that there's just no way that you would have gotten. You didn't like do any contact sports to get those. Well, the next morning after I was up late writing this episode, thinking about the ghost of Hank Williams and how cool it would be if he like showed up, I get up, I'm showering, I'm fixing my hair, and I have my hands over my head, and I look in the mirror, and I don't know if y'all can see it because it's been a couple days, but I'm going to see if y'all can see it. I have this gigantic bruise on my forearm. There's no way that I would have gotten this. I don't do crap. There's no way that I would have gotten a bruise this big. You might not be able to see it. So I think Hank Williams visited me and like grabbed a hold of my arm and was like, "What are you doing, son?" I don't know if that's what he said or not. Do ghosts talk? I guess maybe they do because Patsy Cline was singing in the Ryman. So maybe they do. Well, anyways, I hope you have a great Halloween, and I hope that maybe the ghost of Hank Williams will appear to you since he seems to be in multiple places at once. So I'll be back next week with another wonderful country music history story, unless I die, and then I'll be a ghost, and I'll come to your rooms and haunt you. Come join the family over on my socials. I am at Brent Snyder Music everywhere. I really do think I'm going to take that ghost tour at the Ryman, so I'll document it for you on my Instagram at Brent Snyder Music. You can also follow the show at Root of the Boot on Instagram as well. If you're listening to the podcast version of the show and you want to see photos and videos and links to the source material, you can head over to my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/Brent Snyder Music, or you can go to our website, rootoftheboot.com. Root of the Boot was created, written, produced, filmed, and recorded by me, Brent Snyder, and is an Exit 200 production, which is an entity of Brent Snyder Enterprises, LLC. I'll see y'all next time, and until then, I'll be getting to the root of the boot.